So you can't decide between having a striker or hammered fired gun. In this video, I go over everything you need to know about choosing one or the other. This video is going to be about what you should do in choosing a particular platform for competition. So I won't dive too heavily into how the mechanisms work specifically, but I'm going to give you all the tools you need to think about when choosing whether you should go striker fired or hammer fired. Although I mentioned two different firing platforms, we're actually going to dive into three, which is striker fired and hammer fired, with the distinguishing note between double action, single action, and single action only pistols. If you're new to the channel, just a little context is I have about 50,000 rounds just on striker fired platforms alone, and between these two platforms, probably about another 60 to 70,000. So I have dove in deep, spent the money, and now I'm gonna be able to give you digestible information. Hopefully that makes it easier for you. And here's the thing, there isn't necessarily a perfect answer for which one you should do or which one is better, but I am going to label out the pros and cons based on experience on what direction you could go down. This video is not just for new shooters. If you are an experienced shooter and you're looking to maybe go from striker fire to single action only, I want to kind of lay out the groundwork of what you may expect for that as well. So this does really encompass all the audiences here. Now, before I dive more into that, I ask that if you like this video, please hit that like button, as that helps me a lot. And you're gonna want to subscribe because I'm gonna have more content coming out here soon enough. And just as a quick disclaimer, none of these guns are loaded and have been cleared, as well as all the ammo is way from here. So we're gonna have safe guns we're talking about here. Now I'm going to start with the striker fire platform. This is where a lot of people begin because it is the easiest to maintain, it is the easiest to clean, and is the easiest to use because you're not necessarily having to work an extra brain cell to remind yourself to defeat a safety. You're defeating a safety the second that you depress the trigger, which is this little safety detent on the trigger shoe of this Glock. And the other safeties are simultaneously working at the same time in order for you to fire it. So from your perspective, it's simple to use. And because of their general popularity out in the real world, there are plenty of aftermarket options that you can do with these guns. Now this is just a stock Glock 45, but you can go very wild like this Walther Q5 steel frame, which has everything from brass grips, a magwell, and of course the dynamic trigger from Walther, and particularly with my special springs gives it a 2-pound brake. So there are options to do stuff with this. And to complement that as well, most of your striker fire guns are fairly affordable. Usually the entry prices on Glocks can be anywhere as low as $500 used, and they can get as fancy as the new Walther PDP steel frame, which can go upwards of $1,900. And it's also another great starting point if you don't know which division you want to shoot, because you're going to have plenty of options. I can tell you today that as of this video, carry optics is the most popular division in which you can take your stock Glock like this one and add an optic to it. Now, if you don't want to add an optic, that's fine because the sky's the limit with iron sight divisions, either in IDPA or USPSA. Now, due to the popularity of the striker fire platform, you will see a lot of everyday carry setups based on that. What's great about this is a lot of the competition guns that are actually competitive are very close, or if anything, the same as their everyday carry. So that translation between the two is fairly easy, and it's relevant training for improving those real skills if you ever had to use them. Now, the cons aren't too deep with these. It's more so related to tuning, and where they become a little limited because of their design is that with particularly return springs on the triggers, and I can think of this one, the Walther specifically. Now, the lower you try to make the brake on the trigger, you do actually lose a little bit of reset tension with that, because although this is a 2-pound brake, it actually has a very anemic reset. And for some people out there that aren't in the habit of pushing their finger out forcefully or using the forcefulness of the reset to push it out, that can actually affect reliability of that, and that has everything to do with the fact that you essentially have just one spring operating as what the trigger will break at, as well as returning that. So the lighter you go on the spring, well, that means that spring coming back is also going to be light. So that's kind of a compromise there. Although I mentioned that the aftermarket is huge for these, there's also a barrage of less quality manufacturers. And it's interesting because of all the matches I've shot, when I see reliability issues, it's usually a young man or girl with a hopped up Glock that they threw a lot of parts at, and the guns just do not function properly. And one thing I've learned with striker fires is as you improve your skills, you start to appreciate the original factory design. Funny enough, I've seen a lot of guys make GM in USPSA with stock Glocks, and that has everything to do with the original function of the gun being both reliable and predictable. So believe it or not, I actually started here on the Walther Q5 that you see here, and then I made my way into double action, single action. And why I absolutely love these platforms is the shooting experience on a lot of the available double action, single action guns are awesome. When you're in that single action, you're usually somewhere between a 2.5 to 3 pound pull, and it's consistent, it's light, and the feel of how the gun can be tuned to fit your needs is amazing. Particularly with my Shadow 2 that I used to compete with, this is sprung to my liking. So I love everything about this gun and how it shoots. And that's really the big benefit as you start to fall in the hammer-fired guns in general, is that their tuning ability is nearly unlimited. If you are starting with this thing in double action, you do have the option to shoot plenty of divisions because this particular gun is set up for carry optic, but without the optic, you could certainly run production. Now, where this particular gun gets in trouble is its weight, which now they came out with the compact version, which is a lot lighter. And this particular gun in IDPA, you can run in either carry optic, ESP, stock service pistol, or even concealed carry pistol. So there are plenty of options, and depending on the rule set, you can start in single action with the safety up if you so choose to. My Shadow 2 was incredibly reliable. It would feed and shoot any piece of ammo I threw through it, and I never can really think of a time that I had issues with it until spring started to get tired with them. Now the cons of them, well, tearing them apart is not fun. If you have to do a simple field clean, that's fine. But once you have to start getting into the lower section, the sear housing, things like that, that's where it's a little bit harder than these guys right here. And they do require that cleaning at some point because you can take these guns for a long time from what I've learned without cleaning them, but they get to a point where they just flat out stop, where I've seen Glocks have over 30,000 rounds from some users that have never been cleaned with maybe very minimal oil. These things like their oil, but equally you do have to make sure that you are taking care of them. And so this is probably going to be one of the biggest cons, and this was my hesitation for using this platform to begin with, was for the divisions I chose, you had to start in double action. And if you're not familiar with that, right now this is an unloaded gun, so you've got to essentially pull through about a 9-pound pull. And if you're not used to that and you're new to shooting, that can feel intimidating because then the follow-up shots might throw you off, or you may actually shank a lot of the shots low, which a lot of users tend to when they're new to double action. And so the compromise with that is running single action only. This is where you're going to see most of your race guns. And I'm actually going to start with the cons first. And the reason for that is because a lot of times they're limited on what divisions they can shoot. They're typically on the upper echelon of the classes on each of the organizations you decide to shoot. So that means you're probably going to be throwing a lot of money at these. So a lot of your single action only guns are going to be based on the 1911 platform, like this one right here, which is a Masterpiece Arms DS9. The other popular ones are going to be like your CZ Tactical Sports. Every once in a while I see a SIG 226 that's really tricked out. There's not necessarily a wide variety so much as in your choice of platforms, but there is a tremendous amount of tuning opportunity within these platforms. Now, the one thing I will say is one final con before we move into the pros is that the maintenance on these, especially as you get into the higher dollar ones like this one in my hand, you are going to have to work more to maintain them, largely because the tolerances on them can be so tight that they can be temperamental to either their ammo choice or the amount of oil and cleaning necessary to keep them running 100%. Now, if you're up for spending a few extra bucks and doing all the maintenance involved with owning one of these, well, I have good news for you. They are arguably some of the most pleasurable guns to shoot on the competition scene and in general, especially 2011s. And all you need to do to actually get going with this is, I'm gonna rack it back, is you gotta flip your safety on, which this one's nice and audible, and at the start, you defeat your safety and you can go to work. And so it's simple in the sense of operation, which is why a lot of people like to shoot this, but it is also what excludes it from other divisions because it's ease of operation. And because this platform has been around so long in the competition scene, there are plenty of boutique manufacturers that will make you a fully outfitted one ready for competition, such as this one right here. And here's the thing, if you don't like how the way it feels out of the box, you can certainly start to play with springs, even the weight and where you put it on these guns to tune it to your needs. So tuning these things is near unlimited. You can make it as flat as possible, or you can make it as soft as possible. It's really up to you. Now we've discussed all three of these platforms that are available to you. I'm curious, what do you run and why do you think it's the best? Sound off in the comments below. And until then, guys, we will see you at the range.